Give me 1 second here. I'll get it shared.
And then I'll just start letting people in from that are sitting in the waiting room.
All right, here we go. Share screen one. Should be good to go.
Okay.
So who do I just want to, am I turning it right over to who once I do the intro? I'm just going to do a brief intro. I'm not going to read the whole bio. I'm just going to say, it's ePlus doing artificial intelligence, AI session for us this morning. Who do you want me to present? Or is somebody on ePlus side want to introduce everybody that's on the call?
You can send it. This is Justin. You can send it over to me and then I'll do an introduction.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to New Jersey GMIS coffee session this morning. We are proud to have our corporate partner ePlus present this morning on AI for public safety and government. We all know that that's growing and expanding. So I want to thank you for taking the time to get on the call this morning. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin from ePlus to introduce his team and make the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Robert. So my name is Justin Mesker. I lead the strategy and innovation teams at ePlus. A lot of focus on artificial intelligence and how to help organizations navigate this AI journey that they're all on. I am joined today by Jimmy Hinshaw, who leads our RealWave business unit, and he's going to talk today about things we're seeing in the computer vision and intelligent automation space. So for today, what we're really going to do is kind of share two levels of insights. One, what we're seeing macro level out there in the industry as it relates to AI adoption, where people are succeeding, where they're failing. And then we're going to dig specifically into computer vision use cases around public safety, government, et cetera. Go ahead and use the Q&A chat for any of the questions that come up along the way, and we will answer those for you. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end. So want to talk through, we at ePlus, we've developed a framework called AI Ignite. And the concept behind that is that a lot of organizations are kind of sputtering in the world of AI. And the concept of Ignite is we want to help them ignite a flame that turns into an AI practice that really drives business value to the organization. And part of what we've seen as you look, let's look back 18 months. Let's look 2005 to right now when so much of this transition has happened. We've done a couple surveys of the industry. And what we found is that around the beginning of 2025, everybody said, hey, we're going to try to do something with Gen AI this year. Survey came back and said 75% of people at the beginning of 2025. The reality is when we looked back at the beginning of 2026, pretty much everybody had done something. Now, what happened in the middle of 2025 is it started to be realized that a lot of these AI deployments and investments became skunkworks projects and were not reaching production because they weren't delivering tangible value to the organization. And so the midpoint of 2025 is when I think there was a really big pivot that happened that's important for the context of this conversation. And that is people started becoming very specific around the outcomes they wanted to achieve with AI. And those who were successful usually ended up in one of four targets that they were looking for. Number one is increasing revenue. Number two is decreasing cost. Number three is improving customer, patient, end user, civilian satisfaction. And then number four is reducing risk. And what we saw when we did a survey at the beginning of 2026 is that the desire shifted from people who at the beginning of 2025 really just wanted to find ways to save money. So they went very pointedly at increasing revenue, increasing their the constituent or customer satisfaction. And what that means is they were really intentional about they had a business challenge they believed could be solved with AI, or they had a business outcome they thought could be created by AI. And what we kind of see across the last 18 months, how I'd summarize that is the key all comes down to picking the right use case. And that's really what we're going to focus on in the first part of today's presentation, is how you can find that right use case that's going to create that end value. And then we'll dive into some specifics in the industry everyone here is interested in. So I mentioned earlier our Ignite framework. It seems like a simple slide with 3 simple statements, but I think it's really important to ground this, because where I see people successful is when they are ready, aim, fire. Where I see people struggle is when they ready, fire, aim. And believe it or not, the latter is where more people are spending their time than others right now. So what we see success with is when you begin and work backwards from, again, what's that challenge you want to overcome, or what's that business benefit you want to create. When you get the agreement at the business stakeholder level on that, and you identify a measurable outcome you can create, what it allows you to do is work backwards into an AI use case that you believe can bring that success criteria to life. And then you choose your solutions for deployment. And what we see far too often is organizations say, I really want to use Copilot. I really want to use Claude Enterprise. I really want to use insert tool here. And then they implement it hoping for an outcome. And it's just a harder path to go down. It doesn't mean you can't be successful that way. We find when you work backwards, you set yourself up for great success. So the framework that we follow it's really a 4-step process. And we refer to organizations as AI curious, AI ready, AI mature. And curious doesn't mean that you haven't implemented AI. It means that you haven't implemented AI in a way that is consistent and standardized, that you could rinse and repeat, and in a way that is providing tangible, quantifiable, measurable business value back that you can justify ongoing investment and ROI. So number one, I already mentioned those desired business outcomes. They're usually going to come down to revenue, cost, customer experience, and risk. So you identify something you want to work backwards from. You select the right use case, and the words on the slide here are very intentional. The term data-based decision is really important. We're going to talk about a framework that we've leveraged very successfully with our clients, around helping them take something that maybe wasn't so measurable and turn it into something that is. And then once you identify a use case that you're passionate about, it's all about an accelerated proof of concept. You want to, as quickly as possible, identify, was my theory accurate with that use case? Does my data provide valuable insights? And does it have an ROI? If the answer is yes, I want to succeed fast and scale. If the answer is no, that's okay. But I want to fail fast and I want to pivot to the next use case. Because one thing we've learned is there's no lack of AI use cases out there in any organization. And then finally, if you do get that succeed fast and scale, then you want to build a roadmap to production, which we'll talk about kind of some of the intricacies of what it means to go from proof of concept into successful production. One thing that we always recommend starting with, and this is something we provide, but something that we just recommend organizations to do in general, is this concept of an AI envisioning workshop. The way that we facilitate it is it's a half-day on-site workshop where we'll bring in AI practitioners, and their job is really to be a moderator in a conversation that is going to guide you down a path of identifying where AI is going to create the most value in your organization. So it starts off with, you've got all the business leaders in the organization sitting in a room, not just IT, but all the people that are out there that are trying to drive the business forward to make it better. So you've got a diverse set of people in the room. The first thing to do is to really just set ground rules, level set some knowledge and terminology across the team. So general AI terminology, what's AI capable of doing, what's it not, what are the risks, et cetera. Kind of sets the ground rules for the remainder of the day. And then the session that happens after that is what we call use case ideation. And what this is think blue sky thinking. It goes back to those questions of what challenges do I think AI can help me overcome? What outcomes do I believe that AI can create? And it's a no idea is a dumb idea format. So everybody's throwing things out there, and the ideas start flowing, and write them down on a whiteboard, and you have this big parking lot of AI use cases. And then when we're doing these workshops, we'll bring in a practitioner that has experience in your specific industry, vertical, et cetera. And at the end of your exhaustion of your use case ideation, we'll bring some ideas up that we've seen be successful elsewhere. And you may say, hey, those are great, throw them up on the board. You may say, hey, they're not. Let's just take those off. We didn't mention those for a reason. After that, the important part comes is now you've got this big old parking lot of use cases. which a lot of you probably have, 50, 60, 70 AI use cases that have been rolled up to you at this point, is the secret sauce comes into use case prioritization. So think of this as you want your organization to have a standardized, objective, and measurable way of prioritizing use cases. And the methodology we've delivered for this is we're looking for two different, we're working to look at the business outcome that we can derive by a use case, and we're looking to identify the ease of implementation. And so what we do is all the people that are in the room are going through on their phone, tablet, computer. They're going through some very quick scoring exercises that are going to give us rankings on those. And one thing we think is key to the way this is done is that it's done individually. There's no trying to convince somebody that the use case that you brought in is the best. There's no groupthink. It's very much bringing the diverse viewpoint of everyone in the room to light in a way that results in something that looks like this, which is a use case prioritization matrix where you got the axis on the bottom is ease of implementation. Over to the right-hand side means easiest, quickest, least risk to implement. To the left means hardest, longest pull in the tent, most risky potentially. And then on the left-hand side, on the vertical, is business value. And that is pretty simple. Up at the top is the most business value drive, the bottom is the least. So you end up in this 2x2 matrix. Think of it kind of like a Gartner Magic Quadrant that we've all seen. And the upper right-hand quadrant is your highest priority because in theory, that is your easiest to implement, most business outcome, or what we'll call kind of the low-hanging fruit. Now, the upper left is really important to keep an eye on too, because that's going to be probably your business transformation drivers. Those are things that you're going to drive to over time. It means they're difficult. They might be a little riskier, but you identify they're going to drive significant business value. So the things we keep an eye on, but they're not places that we'd recommend starting off with one of your first couple AI projects. So in this example, you can see there's a hodgepodge of use cases that got brought up all over the place. And what we do is we spend time then in that upper right-hand quadrant. We say, okay, you've got 3 use cases up here that are in that high priority. And this is where we then spend the remainder of the time on identifying which one of those does this group believe could drive the fastest value, and do you believe you could take to POC successfully quickly? Because what you want to do is you want to walk out here with action. I've seen a lot of internal and external use case workshops where people will come in with great ideas and you walk out with a parking lot of 80 ideas. And that's great for a backlog, not great for next steps. So we're really, really hitting on what's the next step. And the way that we look at it is how do we get to a proof of concept? If everyone's really passionate about an idea, and if you can define success metrics around it, that's key. If you can't define success, don't move forward with that one as your first one. If you can identify the data sources that you have in your grasp to bring those to life, and you can identify users that are ready, willing, and able to test that theory, you got a great use case to go test. So the goal by the end of the 4 hours is that we walk out by having a use case proof of concept defined for you, and then we can give you a roadmap to bring that POC to life. I'm going to take a second just to check the chat here real quick to make sure there's no questions before I continue. And it looks like we're good. Okay. So once you get out of that kind of, we call it the POC accelerator, or sorry, when you get out of the envisioning workshop, we look at what's called a POC accelerator. That's the ePlus terminology, but basically what it means is I want to go prove or disprove that theory in an accelerated fashion so that I don't waste time, people, or money on something that ends up not being successful. So you take the outcomes of the workshop that we're done, have a well-defined use case with all the success criteria, and then you turn it into what is usually 30 days is usually the magic number. And the POC accelerator it can be delivered on a variety of different platforms. Could be on, AWS, Azure, on internal on-prem infrastructure, sitting in a colo, M365 Copilot, Cloud Enterprise, ChatGPT Enterprise. Name your tool. This is more about the framework than it is about the tool. And the framework is that a POC accelerator should always be done in your environment, meaning it is an environment owned by you. Could be an M365 Copilot tenant. Could be your ChatGPT Enterprise or Cloud Enterprise tenant. Could be private AI infrastructure sitting in your data center. But the key here is that you're going to put some of your data in here, which means usually trying to put it out into something owned by a third party, a tenant owned by a third party is a challenge. So we believe it should be done in a tenant owned by you. We do not believe that you should be connecting to live data directly. One thing we've seen through our travels is that most data, even the most secure and auditable data sets, are not quite ready for AI yet. So there's some really intentional cleaning and governing and tagging that needs to happen. So what we say is let's export representative data sets and put them into this private bubble you've created. We can anonymize those if necessary, but a lot of times since it's yours, that might not be necessary. But the key is don't touch live data directly in its in-place state. So you export and import, and then you build custom assistants or agents for your use case. And think of the difference between logging into ChatGPT or Gemini, Claude, in your personal account and just asking it a question, right? It's going to answer you as a general person or chatbot would. Then think about a custom agent or assistant that is backed by a specific LLM that has knowledge about your business, that is told to interact with you as a contracts agent or as a, whatever the thing is that you might have that we might have created. So it always has customization for the use case. And then finally, it's always metrics driven. We talked about, you want to fail fast and pivot or succeed fast and scale. The only way to do that is to have metrics that are very quantifiable and objective, meaning you can look at things like the usage. Are people actually using it in the POC? Are the data insights accurate and is it successful there? And then probably most importantly is their ROI. And at the end, what you end up with is a very, very specific red, yellow, green decision. The green light is the easy one. That means you prove it's viable and you prove there's an ROI. So it might mean I need to invest a little bit of money, but it means I'm going to get a lot of money back, or I'm going to need a lot of quantifiable outcome back. So that's easy. You put a path to production together. The red is also pretty easy. It's, you know what? It was a great idea. It's not viable at this time. The ROI wasn't there. Our data doesn't have the insights. Doesn't mean it's dead forever, but it means that it's time to move past this one and move on to the next one. And yellow means, you know what? We're almost there. We see signs of life here and we believe we can get it there, but there's some tweaking that needs to be done. But you end up at the end with a very clear path of what is going to happen next. And ultimately, for our clients that are into the more mature world, what they're trying to build to is something you could call it an AI use case lifecycle. You could call it an AI factory. You can call it an AI center of excellence. There's a variety of buzzwords you can use around what this looks like. But really what it comes down to is you want to have as many innovative AI use case ideas coming from your organization as humanly possible, because every individual right now has amazing ideas in the world of AI. And you want to be confident that you have a way to prioritize those in order to do that. What that means is that you want to build something out that is a funnel that you can push these use cases down through in a consistent and objective fashion. And it's the things we talked about before. It's how do I score and prioritize? How do I select a use case? How do I identify success criteria? How do I look at data security requirements? And how do I define a POC? And once you've started to create the center of excellence internally, what it means is you can start churning these AI use cases through in as aggressive a fashion as you so choose through this, because you're confident at the bottom of this, because you've built out a good process, that only the most valuable use cases are going to come out of the bottom. And you've also built a methodology for POC acceleration. You've got that methodology to test these things out in a private environment in a customized way that's very measurable. So you can very quickly get to that red, yellow, green. And if it's red, go to the next one. If it's green, you move up into production deployment. And that means you, for that use case, are getting your data ready for what needs to be done there. You're putting acceptable use policies in place. You're putting your AI policies in place. You're putting governance tools. You're tagging data. You're enforcing all those things necessary to make sure that no data leaks when AI is present. And then for any given use case, you're looking at what's the right platform. You're going to have corporate standards. You may choose that Cloud Enterprise is the corporate standard, but there may be some things that come up that say, oh, wow, that is really specific to X. And for that one, we want to adopt this tool because it's the best thing for that outcome. So you want to be very intentional about how you do that. And then the final piece that we see a lot of people still have challenges with is when something goes into production, it means that at the time it delivered a ton of business value and it had a great ROI. It doesn't mean that it's going to be that way in 180 days in a year, in 18 months, and 2 years. And if you think to the world of cloud, for those of you that have been in the cloud world, there was this concept of FinOps and how do I have financial operations around my cloud and make sure it stays optimized. This is that on steroids. And I say that because you need to optimize the platform and the tools that are in use to make sure that the costs aren't running out of control. But you also need to optimize the business value being derived by those tools. And that means, are you still deriving the same value? But it also means, did your needs change? Because in the world of ever-changing business needs and AI, just because something was great today doesn't mean it's going to be great in a year. And so what you're doing is constantly looking at these tools and use cases that are in production to decide, am I going to retain this because it's amazing and still deliver much value? Do I need to retool it because either the cost went up or the value drive went down, but we can still get it back on track? Or is this thing just long in the tooth and it's no longer valuable for the organization? I need to retire it. And I think this is probably the most important and mysterious thing right now, because in a world where nobody can really define what a token means as it relates to AI usage, because it's different per platform, per user, per prompt, per everything, is there could be a lot of mystery there, and mystery can lead to runaway cost. And so part of what we focus on at ePlus is helping organizations with a FinOps or a tokenomics is kind of the buzzword right now approach to make sure that you don't have costs run out of control there and that you have a nice life cycle that's going to keep you in check. So with that, we'll check the chat real quick before I transition to Jimmy. And I think we are good. So I am going to go ahead and transition over to Jimmy so that he can introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. Good day. Glad to have the opportunity to speak to you about some of the use case kind of components, that Justin talked about. I'm the director of digital intelligence here at ePlus, and that's basically the operationalizing of AI at the edge. So we'll talk about some use cases specifically that are applicable in the public sector and some things that we can do. ePlus acquired a technology called RealWave. Thanks, Justin. Last year that basically can combine infrastructure you may have in place today. So that could be camera systems, it could be data devices, that could be just monitors of activity or traffic. It could be as simple as a highway counter, a pneumatic tube across a highway. And we can ingest that and then start helping to craft solutions around AI to make smarter cities, secure facilities, and then, of course, help drive ROI through code enforcement. Next slide, please, Justin. So what I'm going to talk through is just basically where does this live within the global ePlus strategy. So as Justin talked through that journey from AI curious to AI mature, we're that use case part that drives to the POC to help drive really specific use cases and deliverable outcomes that can help you prioritize and generate a real ROI on your investment. We want to take these items that you say, hey, this is interesting here. We'd like to apply some technology here to drive this outcome. And we help to evaluate what assets you may have in place. And then we've got our tool, RealWave, which aggregates all that and may add additional AI tools on top of that to then deliver that outcome that you seek, taking you to AI mature. So really the accelerator that really helps the journey from those defining use cases to a POC to a deliverable, repeatable outcome. Next slide, please. Couple things to think about. We talk about use cases when it talks about this specific application. So obviously, you guys are familiar in the public sector with cameras and security. Risk is always a component. I know that in our earlier slides, we talked about how that's a smaller piece, but in the public sector, risk is always a major driver. So obviously, enhancing physical security. So we can take alerts and then make automated actions. What I mean by that is just think of an example of maybe you have a camera monitoring a scene, an area of interest. But if all of a sudden a group of people congregate at a high rate of speed, at a high intensity, you might then want to alert some authorities in that area, hey, we've got a congregation of people at a high rate of speed. I need you to respond and understand what's going on in the scene. So we take the computer vision analyzing the scene where cameras are being watched with AI examining the image. Once we see that image, we say, hey, this is interesting. Then we take and call to action someone to respond to whatever that is. So the goal is to improve operational efficiency. Obviously, when you have a great deal of data that you need to sort through, this is where AI is really great at helping you leverage all those sources of data, combine all that together, and then use computer vision at the video level to analyze and verify that data, make decisions, and then call to action whatever the outcome is you define. Obviously, mitigating risk. Hazards could be everything from unsafe practices. If you think about a safety environment where you have areas that are maybe sectioned off because there's maintenance or there's some kind of construction going off, if someone wanders into that area, you might call to someone to respond to that because there's something in the way there. Or think about maybe some object traveling down a lane, whether it's a river or a highway, and then something goes outside of the expected path of that. You might want to call to action someone to respond to help adjust the path of whatever that object in motion is. Threat detection, we're hearing this more and more. I started with that mob example, but you can actually use AI to analyze scenes and detect certain things, areas of risk, objects that might not be supposed to be in an area, a vehicle. It could be something as small at the granular level. If you're looking at an entry, maybe in weapons detection, or again, those objects in motions, fight. Things in any kind of area that's sensitive, you might really want to take and analyze where it's definitely a concern, but you don't have the manpower to constantly watch assets. So you then use AI to watch those assets on your behalf. Missing person and suspect tracking. Give a use case. There is a customer that's got basically a large closed-in multi-floor area, and they are doing facial recognition, and they have a database of bad actors, people who have been trespassed, for instance, within in that area. The second they walk into that scene, within 60 seconds, their likeness has been sent over to all the law enforcement to say, hey, this person has already been trespassed. Please approach them and ask them to leave. So that same environment can be used for missing person tracking. So that same kind of closed scenario, if someone is missing, obviously it has to be legal in that area and permitted to use facial recognition. In this example I'm talking about, it is. So you can put that face in that database, and then it can track all the assets, all the cameras, to see where that person is and help identify and get them back to the location they're supposed to be at. Traffic optimization. This is one of the easiest ROI generators that we've seen from this technology when it comes to the public sector. Basically, you're using cameras to analyze the scene, understand if vehicles have been left unattended for a long period of time. Think maybe a large open parking lot that may be available for the public to use for time when they're in a facility, but then some people may use that facility as a storage lot, if you will, for vehicles. So then you can see that if a vehicle has been left in an area, a truck or a car or a van, then once that's been there for a certain amount of time that you've defined, then you can call to action and say, hey, here's this vehicle, here's this lot, send that over to this agency so they can then go maybe issue a violation to get some revenue for that time that vehicle's been spent in that area. And that could be at any kind of traffic setting, whether it's a parking garage, an open lot, even at the street level in individual spaces. And that leads into that automated parking enforcement. Obviously, no parking zones in front of fire lanes, fire hydrants, loading zones. When you've got a way to, today a lot of those responses to those traffic violations are route-based. So you may have an agent that is traveling through a route to go find and enforce those, but it may be more efficient to then have the technology look for and then alert and then call to action. Hey, agent, I need you to go to respond here. This vehicle has been violating this area that's been defined for X number of time. So it drives that efficiency. Not only is it helping you to react to the offending vehicles that may be abandoned, but it's also driving your labor efficiency by making your agents more efficient going and responding to those and being able to write, citations or whatever the process is to get those vehicles and drive revenue. And last, mobile inspections. We're seeing this more and more where people are utilizing their cameras they have today and applying AI on top of that to say, hey, are all of our vehicles back in the yard where they're supposed to be at night? Think about, like an example I've given here, street sweepers or garbage trucks. Are they here? Are they all in place? Which means, are they ready and staged for the next day to be efficient? obviously starting to look at open manhole covers, vegetation, illegal dumping, all of those items that could be drivers where today you may have a camera that is looking at a scene, but you're not analyzing that to call to action someone to respond to all those things I mentioned. So there are ways that you can apply the AI in these use cases in the public sector to be able to examine the scene, grab data. And when I say data, that can be video, it can be sensors, things you may have in place today, aggregate that, and then funnel that up into the enterprise engine at the government level to then be able to respond to all of those items that you've defined. Next slide, I'm gonna pause for a second, just check the chat, just like see if there's any questions. Looks like we're good right now. So if you think about some examples here, and we've got some things imaged here, it can be as simple as a camera as a sensor. We can integrate into technologies you may have in place. Of course, you have lots of cameras and assets in place. We can utilize privacy protection sensors like LiDAR as well, which uses points of light to scan an area for areas of interest. We've even ported the technology into drones that might be automated and go fly and analyze a scene, and talk about that parking lot example earlier I mentioned, being able to fly over a scene and count objects and see if how long things have been attended or unattended. And then, of course, all of that can be compiled from the edge and then scale all the way through our secure backbone up to the enterprise level or government level to be able to maintain that. And we've got integrations into everything from weigh scales to, again, the pneumatic tubes I talked about, the traffic counters, even all the way to just a simple sensor when someone opens a door and gains access. So access control systems, third-party access control systems. We have integration with all those devices to be able to help drive actionable insights that we can then call to action. Go to the next slide, please. Now, this is a video of an area. If you can think about this, this is traffic of obviously humans, but this same tool could be used to analyze vehicles or objects in motion as well. Justin, this will play, I believe. If you click the screen, it should just play here. So what we've got is we developed, there's two parallel lines kind of across the middle of the scene, and we have drawn those as entry and exit points. So what this is demonstrating is, and you'll see the number on the right change, it'll increase and it'll decrease. So what we are doing is using LiDAR, so because there's no personal identifying information captured, to count how many people enter the scene and then leave the scene. And we're counting them in through this area. We just built these lines here to demonstrate how this works. So we've got unique visitors. And what I mean by that is, if the same person goes in, when they exit, we know that's the same person, not a different person going in and out. So this could be monitoring vehicles in and out of a controlled area. It could be people in and out of a controlled space, any object in motion. So literally you define an area, then you're using the intelligence to watch that area to count. And then from that insight, you can make some more decisions. And the next slide will show how this operates at scale, where we've got a larger environment. And here we're basically, this is a casino environment. And what we're doing here is monitoring all the traffic of all the unique visitors throughout the entire facility. And what we are looking at is when they enter into the scene, where do they go? How long do they linger there? Where do they go next? So from that, you can make a lot of decisions. In this environment, obviously, they're seeing how much time people spend at each station within this environment. In the public sector, it might be if you've got a mall or an open park, or you may have an event space, you might see how long people enter that space, where the areas of interest are, or the areas where there's not interest, where you might have to do some more things to make that space more inviting to the public. So all these little green squares are individual people that we are actually tracking through this environment. Everyone gets a unique ID. And then from that, we can see how many people visited total, where they spend each area, and we block this up in sectors, and we can actually track objects, people, vehicles, objects in motion from each area from stage A to stage B across zones and keep that unique identifier. The next slide will indicate what we do with this data. So we ingest this back again, this casino environment. We see where everyone entered into the main area from, where they came from, In this case, it could be like table games, walkways, casino walkways. Then they go to an area, which they define as the roulette tables, the area of interest. Where do they go next? And then how much time do they spend in each area? So I just share this example to get you thinking about if you're tracking objects, you might understand where they're coming from and where they're going. Obviously, if you've got maybe assets like cameras, the people entering into your state, town, city, where they go into typically, what are your areas of entry? Then once they go into that, where do they go from there? How long do they spend time in each of those areas? There's a lot of things you can do with that data. Obviously, this is a tracking people, but it could be vehicles as well. Go ahead, Justin, next slide. And this is just a break it down a little bit more, stepping down through the use cases. So with our solution, we can take computer vision, we define an area. Here in this area, I've got that red square there. And I can define a car, a truck, a bicycle, a van, a motorcycle, a bus. In this area, we want to understand what type of objects go through this area. This is a loading lane for a facility where it's only supposed to be trucks and vans. But if people that are not trucks and vans go into this space, like bicycles or motorcycles or buses, obviously we want to call to action. So we're analyzing that with an existing camera, running the AI engine on that. And then we created a custom model on top of this as well that will also grab the logo off the vehicle. It'll read the text and say, hey, this is this truck or this delivery agent, like think of a UPS or something like that. We can identify what type of vehicle it is. And then when they enter that space, we call to action, hey, there's a bicycle here, go out and tell those people they're not supposed to be in this area, or prepare yourself for a delivery you've been waiting on because this carrier showed up. So that's an AI source, analyzing the scene. Then we can take and combine that with data. So for instance, like I've got in here, traffic count strips, access control, RFID, locks, temperature sensors, IoT sensors. So that same area that I was scanning for a vehicle to come in, what I will also track is when they come in, if there's RFID, when they back up to the gate, I can combine those two things together and say, hey, we've got this truck that arrived. All these RFID objects were detected. We probably know what inventory we're going to be receiving in that case. Furthermore, if it is one of our drivers or a driver that is known, they would come through and then you would detect their vehicle. Then you would scan their ID badge. You would know exactly that one of your team has arrived because it was their vehicle and that person that you were expecting. So combining data from a data device like a access control system or an RFID sensor with video, with AI to define a specific outcome that calls to action the party that needs to respond to those folks. Next slide, please. And last, once we get all this data, we report it. And that's when we start going up into the enterprise level or government level. So once we grab all this, obviously we can put it in a customizable dashboard of here's all the areas of interest today. Here's the number of garbage trucks that went through this area today, or the number of tractor trailers that went through this area today. Here's the number of people who went through on vacation on a roadway, for instance. And we can score all those metrics. Then we can also grab all that data and say, here's all the things we care about, or here's some risk areas. We grab those video, populate this into a dashboard. We can see what all that data means based on rules you create. We can also pull all that data and push it into the other models, like AI models or data systems you may have in place. We can collect, aggregate all that data, and then push it out into whatever mechanism that you may have in place. And that's really where the ePlus story comes in, because we can collect everything at the edge, port it up into the core, and then call to action, derive action items from all that data. Now, really, what it talks about, what we're getting at is that with the whole journey, it's very important because a lot of things are possible to drive that use case specific, define those specific use cases, and then who's going to act on those data to really drive that ROI. So it's a holistic solution from the edge all the way up through the core in your business to drive an outcome in a true POC that delivers a real ROI. And this is just an architecture slide just to talk about really how all these items come together within the RealWave system. If you think about it as a virtual manager, where I'm responsible for analyzing all the data points, ingesting all of that data, whether it can be from the site level, can be cameras and sensors, access control. Then in the agentic level, I'm going to be putting all that data through LLMs, predictive models, anomaly detections, all the rules you define. I'll be categorizing that when I receive that into really four major stores. I'll have the media store, which is just going to be the video, the images, the data. The semantic vector store, where I would say, hey, I need to start classifying things like black Ford trucks, blue Chevy Bolts, whatever make model vehicles, just to give you an example, into that piece. Then I'm going to start structuring those rules and categorizing. These are prioritized. And then I'll grab all the virtual artifacts from that. It might be a digital twin. I might create some images of that data to be able to act. Then I'll ingest all of that and then push that out into the dashboard I mentioned, or notifications, called actions, or integration into enterprise business systems. So basically, if you start with the edge, all your local data sources, push that into the engine at the higher level to grab that, like a higher level at the core in that agentic level, to then act on it, and then push that out to where we're calling folks to action and to drive ROI. And that's about it.
Awesome.
Back to you, Justin.
Jimmy, I'm actually going to ask you a question that I get asked a lot when I present this in the public sector government space. Is you've already got thousands of cameras deployed today. How much rip and replace is needed to get some of this functionality in place?
I really appreciate you asking that. We support tens of thousands of existing cameras out there. So really, all we need is the stream. You don't have to replace that device. So if you have a camera today that we can get access to the stream from that, it's called an RTSP stream, we can ingest that. And if you've got smart cameras that may be doing some local AI at the edge, we can ingest that data as well. So basically, you don't have to replace. We created the system as an aggregator to try to utilize what infrastructure you have in place. And that's really the magic of what we do. Is we're not trying to replace the assets. We're just trying to organize it.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that. I think that's what's made it click in a lot of the conversations that I've had is, hey, I can get to a lot of this given, structure, components, things that I already have, which makes it much more attainable than, hey, let's roll out 5,000 new cameras.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially when you talk about the public sector, they have a lot of technology deployed, and in often cases, a lot of disparate technology, because things were implemented at different times to solve different problems. And that's why we have evolved to support so many thousands types of cameras, or access control systems, or third-party data devices is the buzzword for it, because things happen over time. So you have to be able to be open to ingest all that information.
Makes sense. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say we got a little time that we had left here for Q&A. I'll pull up the chat here. While people are thinking about anything they might want to put in, because I don't see anything in there right now, I did want to bring up one. I did a presentation last week that was very similar on the West Coast. And one of the questions that I got is, this is great. You're talking about all the things that go well. Tell me about things that haven't gone well. So many use cases failed. Tell me about some of the failures. And one that I'll share that I think hits home with a lot of people is it's a lot of times restricting your scope on a proof of concept is the biggest key to success. So an example I'll give is, we were working with a parking company who was working on, for every parking garage they have, they have to manually set the pricing for all of their garages, and they need to be more dynamic to keep up with their business. And so they had a theory that you could have a dynamic pricing engine and could do things more intelligently via data that exists today versus having to go out there and manually do it. And the theory was proved sound, but because the scope of the POC was defined so large, with so many different cities and concepts and that, it ended up being too much data to try to consume all at once. And so I wouldn't call it a failure because it ultimately will turn into a bunch of micro use cases that will end up happening. But I think it proved that boiling the ocean when you're looking to do a proof of concept can be a challenge. You want to try to take a subset of data, a subset of concepts and use case, and go after that to prove that out. And then you kind of crawl, walk, run, or you put building blocks on top of each other to start to build that house. So my recommendation is always don't let your eyes get too big up front because it's easy, especially when you hear guys like Jimmy talk about some incredibly compelling use cases, things like that, is that instead of trying to do all of that stuff at once, try to find one thing you want to prove. Try to take that one room that Jimmy showed on there to find the ingress and egress point and prove that you can do that in one room, then trying to prove you can do it in an entire building. So that's the one question I get quite a bit that I wanted to let's bring up. We pull up the chat here. Anything else? I think that is it, Robert, unless you see anything on your side.
I do not.
No.
Just one question that I'll throw out there is government I would say local government more so is so local to adopt AI initiatives, right? There's still that and typically local government is the last to make adoptions of things, right? Data went to the cloud years before local government did it.
Yeah.
So how do and I get the use cases, but what tools, because I have some administrators that don't even want to hear the word AI. They don't, they're not even open to anything. So it's kind of like, I know AI is coming, and that's what I keep telling them. We're not going to be able to avoid this, right? We need to embrace it to use it. And then I'm building some slow use cases that I'm doing just on internal stuff. But how do we get those people who don't want to hear the word AI to listen?
Yeah, a couple things I would say, and then I'll let Jimmy piggyback on top of it is number one is go slow. We see this in healthcare, we see this in state and local government, we see in highly regulated industries that are usually slower movers on technology because of the risk, because of the compliance. Is go slow and go in places where you're comfortable. So a lot of times it'll be AI capabilities embedded in a tool you're already running. AI embedded capabilities in something that's sitting in your data center or within your control rather than saying, hey, let's go throw our data out into a third party system. So I would say, start at a place where your data sits. So you either have to take your data to the AI compute capabilities or you have to bring the compute capabilities to your AI. So anything that's embedded is going to keep you from having to move your data out of a place that you are that you're comfortable with. And then the other one is just, walk in thinking about, again, it goes from I'm trying to solve a problem and I think AI can create a solution to it, rather than I'm trying to evaluate AI concepts to figure out where they can fit. And I think the latter is very uncomfortable for people because it's taking a foreign technology and saying, like, how can I wave this magic wand and make life better? Versus, hey, I have this problem I have not been able to solve. Is there some sort of technology that's been advanced by AI that's going to allow me to now solve it? And that becomes a little more comfortable because it's crawl, walk, run versus just going from to a straight sprint. Jimmy, any other thoughts you would throw on top of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that helps people understand and adopt is when they can see it as a benefit and not a threat. So what I mean by that is if you can demonstrate how it can help them become more efficient, and then also, especially local government, generate a positive return on their budget because they're also budget sensitive. So if you can show how the tool can help them save labor and make their people more efficient and happier within the government structure, whoever those people are, giving them a tool instead of a threat is one of the big things to help them understand the benefit for sure. And obviously, if you can generate, say, hey, if you deploy this, it will make your labor more efficient here at just as a simple level, and then we'll generate some return here because it's now empowering them to go on traffic tickets is one of the easiest things. Just violations, getting able to recoup revenue. If they can say, hey, this is a tool that generates efficiency and revenue and not a threat, that's one of the biggest things that I see that's important to help them adopt and understand. But it's got to be very clear. You have to have an understandable use case. Otherwise, it's in the ether and they can't grasp it.
It's a really good call out. I'll wrap on, we see a lot of user enablement, user empowerment. I don't like to call it user training because training is just how to use a tool. But I think user empowerment is more about how to create a culture shift that is AI friendly. And part of the way that I look at this is, AI as a digital coworker, AI as a digital assistant, not AI as replacing something, but by augmenting what you're doing today. So if you were to ask any worker in your organization, hey, if I were to hire you an assistant and I wouldn't charge you anything and they could just show up tomorrow and they'd already have full knowledge of everything that, of all the policies and rule books and things, would you want that person to work with you for you? The answer is probably yes. Okay, well, what if I could give you that and it's just a digital assistant? And they're completely and totally under your control and direction. And you treat them as such, right? You don't trust that they're going to be 100% accurate day one. Because if I hired you someone to work with you and they walked in and you showed them where the bathroom is and you sat them down at the desk and you asked them to be 100% accurate on an analysis, you probably trust but verify. Same exact way you treat a digital coworker. So a lot of it's that mentality shift on that. And we've seen that really open people's eyes from a knowledge worker perspective on how to be so much more effective. And they can start to work on the things they're passionate about versus that mundane day-to-day stuff that might just be weighing them down.
Very good. Anybody else have any questions? Don't see any in the chat. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, we want to thank ePlus. I mean, it's very intriguing because my mind is thinking as I'm looking at this presentation, every time I walk into a store, I'm being tracked. So, it's, and we know that's the case. So, but again, I said thank you. I think it was a good presentation, brought a lot to light. Personally, I wasn't even thinking some of the law enforcement side or the public safety side of it. And I can see that there is good use cases out there for that of it. So it's going to make me think outside the box when we look at it. But again, I appreciate you guys doing this. Again, we thank you for being a corporate partner of New Jersey GMIS and all that you do for us. And wish everybody a good day.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.